So whatever be the political motivations, there is no doubt that this man was corrupt and is now paying for abusing his position. But that's in China. What about India? This country has seen more than its fair share of scams. Political scams have ended careers of ministers, put cabinets to shame, even toppled governments. But the long-drawn fight for justice rarely concludes with the culprits behind bars. This is not a commentary on the court verdicts that we shall discuss in just a few seconds from now. It's a hard look at the entire system in India that fails to punish the powerful. We are starting with the 2G scandal. It was called India's biggest corruption scam, one that allegedly cost the exchequer more than $40 billion. 10 years ago, 122 telecommunication licenses for operating 2G spectrum were awarded to companies. 4 years later, India's highest court cancelled these licenses. The government's auditor had raised red flags. The then telecom minister A. Raja was accused of selling bandwidth at a fraction of its worth. A huge public outcry followed. India's resources had been squandered. A. Raja was forced to step down. The government was left red-faced. An investigation dragged on for years. What happened? All the Raja, along with 18 others, were declared not guilty. Why? Because there was no conclusive evidence, and this country is living with the theory that there was a massive scam, but nobody is guilty. Another similar fraud that took place under the watch of the Congress-led central government was the coal scam. Mining blocks were unfairly allocated to private companies. The criteria for giving these licenses were changed three times in a span of 5 years. Private firms benefited. The government lost $33 billion of the taxpayers' money. What happened to those involved? Then Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh was declared clean. His officials had apparently kept him in the dark. They were accused. A state chief minister and a union coal secretary were held guilty in this case. They were jailed for 3 years. Almost immediately they got bail. This case is now languishing in a higher court. Basically, no one's in jail. Next comes India's international humiliation due to corruption, the mess of the Commonwealth Games. 8 years back, India hosted the sporting event in the capital, New Delhi. Initial estimates said that this event would cost the government $270 million. By the end of it, the government had spent close to $4.1 billion. That's almost 16 times the proposed sum. So how did the cost shoot up? Corrupt politicians in this country looted the coffers. An audit revealed grave financial irregularities. Projects were given to favourites. Very high sums were paid for very poor services. India became a global joke. Senior Congress leader Suresh Kalmadi was the key accused. Former Delhi Chief Minister Sheila Dikshit was named. 8 years later, there's no action against them. Now to the financial capital of India, Mumbai, and a project that was meant to help families of those martyred in the Kargil war. The 31-story ADARSH housing complex was plum property in an expensive city. Politicians and bureaucrats took the lion's share. Was anyone punished? Then Chief Minister Ashok Chavan was forced to step down, and that is it. Nobody has gone to jail in this case. And the country's biggest defense scam, Bofors. The year was 1986. India had signed a deal with a Swedish arms manufacturer called AB Bofors. The plan was to buy howitzer guns for $1.6 billion. At that time, it was one of the biggest defense deals in the world. A year later, Swedish news agencies reported that top Indian politicians had been paid massive kickbacks, bribes, to facilitate this $1.6 billion deal. India could never get hold of the alleged middleman in this case, Ottavio Quartarocci. He's dead. Nobody knows if then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi took those bribes. He too is no more. Basically, this case has fizzled out, the money is lost, and nobody was punished. This list can go on forever, but we'll spare you more examples. The point we're making is this: the corrupt and powerful almost always go scot-free in this country. We ask why. Bangladesh also saw protests. India has let this issue fester. Bangladesh, in a bold move, has scrapped reservation. WION's Dhaka Bureau Chief Saad Hamadi has more.
On the 11th of April, Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina announced a historic decision.
I worked the hardest to empower women. I put women everywhere. Now the girls are saying they don't want the quota. They said they will compete in the exams. I'm glad to hear that. If even the girls don't want quotas, let's just scrap the whole quota system.
The decision comes after 4 days of protests from students and job seekers across the nation. The protest began sometime in February but gathered steam earlier this week and turned violent in some places too. University exams were cancelled. Bangladesh's capital city of Dhaka also came to a standstill as thousands marched against the controversial law. While Prime Minister Hasina's announcement has been welcomed by many, our protest is mainly for the reformation of the quota system. At present, most of the government jobs are given through a quota system and the intelligent candidates are not getting opportunities to compete, which means that unqualified people are occupying important positions and causing problems. There's been a mixed response from Bangladesh's lawmakers, who don't want the system to be completely abolished. The existing system offers 44% jobs on merit and the other 56% was reserved for other categories like descendants of freedom fighters, women, ethnic minorities and people with special needs.
Students have called off the protest after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina announced the revocation of reservation in the government service recruitment. The students demanded that the reservation of existing 56% be reduced to a percentage where more common students have access to government jobs. But a complete revocation is not something they wanted. Yet they've respected Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's decision and have called off the protest that had cut off Dhaka city as a result of the surge of students on the streets. At the Dhaka University, Saad Hamadi, WION.
It's a remarkable decision. Now here's the deal in India. The population of this country is 1.3 billion. Nearly 25% of these belong to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, SCs and STs as they're called. These are socially marginalized sections. The other backward castes make up 41% of India's population. All these groups are entitled to reservation or quota. They get special seats in schools, colleges, government jobs, even India's parliament. The states of Punjab, West Bengal and Uttar Pradesh have the highest concentration of scheduled castes, while Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Odisha have the largest population of scheduled tribes in India. Now look at the extent of reservation. In colleges and universities funded by the government, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes get 23% of the seats. Another 27% goes to other backward classes. So the general category, meaning the rest of the population of this country, has got a shot at just 50% of the berths. It's grossly unfair, they say. The level of reservation varies from state to state. In at least 4 northeastern states, only 20% of government jobs are open for the general category, which means 80% are reserved for one section of society. In Andhra Pradesh, 50% of government jobs and college seats are reserved. In West Bengal, 35% are reserved. Some economically backward sections of the Muslim population also get quota under the OBC category. And then there's reservation in Parliament. The lower house, the Lok Sabha, has 84 seats reserved for the scheduled castes, 47 seats for the scheduled tribes. In a country with a ballooning population and limited resources, quota basically has slashed opportunities available to the youth. Look at Tamil Nadu, for instance. 69% of government jobs in that state and college seats are reserved. So what does the Constitution of India say about caste and quota? As per Article 15, any discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex or place of birth is prohibited. This article has served as the foundation for all existing laws that govern reservation in India. It was written in 1947. India's constitution was adopted in 1950. Reservation was meant to be implemented only for a decade, 10 years. Almost 7 have passed. 7 decades, I mean. A lot of water has flown under the bridge. Things have changed. India has changed, but quota remains. We believe it must be scrapped in all its forms. The poor and oppressed almost never get the benefits. The creamy layer, the well-to-do among certain castes continue to milk quotas, and the have-nots in the upper caste suffer unfairly. In 2015, India's Supreme Court had called for an end to reservation in colleges. 3 years on, the political class has not moved a finger to implement that order. Far removed from this tragedy and fighting is the changing face of Saudi Arabia. The country is holding its first ever Fashion Week. Take a look.
Meet the new Saudi Arabia at Riyadh's plush Ritz-Carlton Hotel as the first ever Fashion Week opens. And while renowned designers Jean-Paul Gaultier and Roberto Cavalli are a proud part of this debut show, fashionistas from the Arab world will not be denied their due.
Fashion has always been an interest of Saudi Arabia. It has never been something that was not on the table or in the picture. It's just right now. We're trying to do, Arab Fashion Council is trying to bring the fashion industry in Saudi Arabia into a whole new level. A whole new industry. The industry has always been existing, but more impacting on social change, more about that. So it's not just an event. We have so many plans beyond the event.
And like Paris, Milan and Dubai, the Saudi Arab Fashion Week is also listed as an international event but will not be open to cameras, while the attendees remain women only. The Fashion Week in Riyadh forms part of sweeping reforms announced by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman since his appointment last June. This includes allowing Saudi women to drive cars. Current rules banning them from driving will be lifted this summer. The ultra-conservative kingdom will open the doors to the first chain of movie halls in April. Incidentally, Saudi films will make their debut at this year's Cannes Film Festival, all harbingers of the new dawn on the Saudi horizon. Akanksha Swaroop, WION.
Since we're talking about Make in India, this is simply called India's very own GPS. India successfully launched into space a navigation satellite that can serve both military and civilian needs. And the Indian regional navigation satellite system is considered at par with the US-based GPS, Russia's GLONASS and Galileo developed by Europe.
Amid tough times, when the Indian Space Research Organization is struggling to restore the snap link with its recently launched communication satellite GSAT-6A, it now has a reason to smile. ISRO has successfully launched the IRNSS-1I navigation satellite, giving India its very own GPS. Launched from Sriharikota, the satellite is part of India's NAVIC system. The system provides two types of services: standard positioning service and restricted service. Worth $213 million, the NAVIC system consists of 9 satellites, 7 in orbit and 2 as substitutes. The fully operational system is expected to provide accurate position information service to users across the country. The NAVIC is useful for fishermen to reach potential fishing areas. The fishermen can also get alerts about weather conditions, high waves, or nearing the international maritime boundary line. These services are provided through a software application on a smartphone. The Indian Space Agency also said NAVIC is useful for merchant ships in their navigation and during search and rescue operations. In the road transport sector, NAVIC helps commuters to traverse distances and also enables transport operators to track their vehicles. The navigation system is also helpful for railways in tracking trains and also giving an alert in the case of an unmanned level crossing. It is also used for other applications such as location-based services, survey and alignment, and time-synchronized services. Presently, only Russia and the United States have fully operational navigation systems, while China and Europe are still deploying theirs. With the latest launch, the Indian NAVIC system has been completed, and ISRO is now planning a new IRNSS series. Bureau Report, WION.